Hello and welcome to the Faces of Africa Pocket Edition, where we dissect and discuss the topics covered in our weekly documentary show, which takes you through the continent's history, cultures, and major issues through exploring great personalities. This week on Faces of Africa podcast, we're talking about an interesting documentary from Mali. The name of the documentary is A Gun for a Guitar. It's a story about Ahmed Ag Kaedi. My name is Fathiya Nur, and I have here
Daniel Furnad of CGTN.
You are the executive producer of this documentary. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Sure. This is about a group of an ethnic group called the Tuaregs who are fighting for a homeland. Mm-hmm. And it's about a man that wanted to get involved in this fight, but decided he didn't want to kill other human beings. And he found another way to try to advance the goals of his group. Mm-hmm. It has some relevance today as you see the Palestinians without a homeland and you see the Tuaregs without a homeland. And a lot of the problems that they have are based on boundaries drawn by colonial European countries that didn't take into consideration these ethnic groups and what they need. Mm-hmm. And again, today, some of those situations will be corrected and others will be long and hard to fix.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think also just while watching the documentary myself, I think something that I really noticed is the fact that even Ahmed himself, like many young Tuaregs, they go into fighting. And in this particular documentary for Ahmed, he goes to Libya under Muammar Gaddafi in 1985 and he fights in that war. But when he comes back, he sees it differently. He thinks about music as a different tool or a different, trying to give peace in any particular area where there's war. But I want us to talk about the Tuaregs people specifically. There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the Tuaregs. Well, the majority of them are Muslims. But then there's a link with Tuaregs and, extremists in terms of terrorism, right?
Well, actually, the Tuaregs found an alliance with some of the Islamists back in the 2012 when they were getting some material help. Again, Gaddafi had trained some of these people to fight up in North Africa. And then you had some Islamists that had very specific goals, which were to advance Sharia law over Mali and the other neighboring countries, Niger and Burkina Faso. This is where the Tuaregs broke away. They didn't agree with that. They are Muslims, but they are looking for a different brand of Islam in their region and really want a separatist home, not so that they can enforce their own rules, but so that they can have their own identity.
Yeah, talking about identity, actually, one of the ways, even for the audience, I'm sure, to just understand how the Tuaregs, you can spot a Tuareg, especially the men, they cover their faces and their head. You only get to see their eyes, probably. And one of the misconceptions, or one of the reasons that they put on that is they say that, to protect them from evil spirits. One of the things, of course, when it comes to like desert stories, that's what you hear. Is there any other thing that you found in the documentary in terms of how they look unique?
Well, sure. And, it's funny because you talk about the evil spirits, but it's also because of the sand. You find many groups that are attached to the desert that have to take certain precautions or have certain traditions that are just based on protecting their bodies, protecting their health. But yeah, it's kind of fun, some of the stuff that they do. The swords that they wield and dance with, more in terms of ceremony than in terms of intimidation. But yeah, it is quite an interesting group to look at, and I think that this documentary really brings out a lot of their unique traditions.
Yeah, and it's interesting when it comes to, you talked about, the struggle of looking for their homeland. And the Tuaregs are spread out, especially in North Africa. They're in parts of Libya, they're in Mali, they're in Burkina Faso, they're in Niger. So you see how they've been spread out. But specifically in this documentary, it's about Mali. And they're still fighting up until today. Do you think it's a consequence of what you talked about earlier about, colonialism at the time, not being able to draw the right boundaries or borders when it comes to African countries?
Well, if this had happened in the 1960s and the French, who were controlling most of the region, had recognized that the Tuaregs, were a separate group had a separate identity. Some of this could have been avoided. Since then, you've had Islamists that come in trying to do what they want to do. You've had the fall of democracy in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and military governments supported by the Russian mercenary group Wagner come to power. The Western powers would like it all magically to go into a democracy. But yeah, it's a mess that was created by drawing arbitrary lines in the sand. And it's only something that will get solved when I believe when you give self-determination to the people in the region.
Definitely. But I think now, specifically in this documentary, it's the fact that they put down the guns and the swords away from fighting and killing people and now putting it into music, which is an interesting tool, or instrument when it comes to peace. Let's talk about that a bit, because I don't understand, of course, their language. And I'm sure you don't also. But then it's interesting to see how you also get to enjoy their music, right?
Well, I mean, certainly, when I was listening to it, I was definitely grooving to the tunes. I'm an old rock fan, but there was lots of stuff in there that would appeal to people with different tastes of musical genres. You get a good idea of what the main character sings about, though, and how he sings about wanting a homeland, but he sings about achieving it through peace and not inflicting misery on his people or the people that also inhabit that region. So there's some nice stuff in here, and the music is used very effectively throughout. I mean, you sometimes you hear a documentary that is about music and you don't hear the music all the time. You think, what's going on? This one, wow! I mean, the whole way through it, you can really feel you're there, and you can feel what the music is trying to achieve.
Their first move was to wage a religious war on music and ban the music festival.
One of the first decisions this Islamists take was to forbid the music. No more festival, no more concert. Even listening to music from a phone, a telephone, was forbidden.
When you watch the documentary, you see that as much as he's trying to do something positive, not everybody welcomed the whole idea of music. And in fact, at some point, he actually had to leave where he was staying at that point because of that kind of, not, they don't accept it Islamically, according to what the documentary was saying. But again, the documentary also takes you to Berlin in Germany, where now they go to a festival. Did you see that part?
Yeah, certainly. And the Desert Festival became quite a phenomenon. And yes, the Europeans wanted a part of it. They wanted to taste the Tuareg tunes. Eventually, what they did is the festival kept getting bigger and bigger, and they wanted to put it somewhere that was accessible to people from around the world. So it ended up in eastern Senegal at its height. But, the great part is that when you have these music festivals, it gives a chance for young people to get together, to talk about what they have in common, and sometimes to find solutions.
Right, exactly, to find solutions, because I wanted us to talk about the takeaway out of this documentary, because it just shows you that, you sometimes have to put the guns down and, look for other ways of ensuring this peace. You see, the Tuaregs are a nomadic group. And a lot of African countries that have pastoralists actually fight when it comes to livestock and issues like that, especially here in Kenya also. Is there something else that you saw in the documentary that could be a takeaway for the audience?
Yeah, just that, the only way to end wars is for people to rise up together and find a voice together to ask for it to stop, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Sudan, or whether it's in the Sahel region. People need to get together and say that they want things to be stopped, and to use music to bring people together, to use these ideas that they have to find peaceful solutions. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth a try.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel.